What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I wanted to share a deck that is incredibly tricky and also incredibly magical that you should definitely try out this weekend. Last weekend, when I needed to get my wins with Merlin for the weekend mission, I loaded up the game's auto deck, and this is what it suggested for me. This deck is absolutely wild, so I just wanted to do a short video breaking down the different cards in it and where this deck could potentially go in the future. I've got some ideas. My first thought when I saw this deck, I'll be honest, was how is this the auto Merlin deck? Because this looks absolutely wild, and the fact that M'Baku is in it probably just means this is like some deck that a content creator put out a video on. I asked around. If you know who created this deck, let me know, but it looks absolutely wild, and I played a few games with it and started to realize there's a lot more synergies going on here than just playing a bunch of random cards. The first thing to note is M'Baku, which will jump out of your deck at the end of the game, and typically that's only like a 25% chance to happen in any given game that M'Baku will be one of the 3 remaining cards in your deck. However, Merlin has the opportunity to shuffle M'Baku back into your deck, which is a cheeky interaction with Merlin's spell that gives you 2 energy. I don't know the name of this spell actually. Once and Future. So you can use Once and Future to shuffle the M'Baku back into your deck, get the 2 energy from it, and then use that 2 extra energy to play some of the more expensive cards in this deck and really just Galactus them. This deck is only trying to do one thing, and that is Galactus your opponents. But there's a lot of crazy stuff going on around that. We've got a Zabu Surge Ramp Shell, which is interesting because Zabu does not ramp out Galactus, of course, and then Surge is somewhat unlikely to actually ramp out Galactus, but with how the deck is constructed, Zabu, in all of the cards that it can hit, can help you get that Galactus out. And also, Zabu and Surge can be reasonable junk for Merlin to throw away. One thing that Merlin needs is a stream. You often see it played with like the Hood because you need polymorph targets, and Zabu and Surge can provide that. Surge a little bit less so, because if you play the card that you get off of Surge, you can resurge down the line. But sometimes you just want a Once in Future or a polymorph target, and Surge and Zabu can both provide that. I fall into a little bit of a trap with Merlin, thinking that it is really polymorph that matters. And I was just talking about polymorph. I'm going to talk about polymorph again later on in this video, but this is really a Once and Future Merlin deck, because this is a ramp deck, and Merlin is kind of underexplored as a ramp card, and that +2 energy can allow you to do some really cool things in this deck, like play Galactus on turn 4 after you Once in Future on turn 3. And just looking for those lines, especially where you can set up a Galactus location where you already have cards because you Once in Future away in M'Baku or even your Merlin, so that way Galactus can be the only card at a location and be able to activate again. So Merlin can, that's why I say that this deck is magical and tricky. There's just some magical and tricky cards in it, but Merlin being able to Once in Future a card in a location, sometimes multiple cards in a location, to clear it out for you and set you up for Galactus is super satisfying. We'll get back to Luke Cage and Esme Cuckoo in a moment, but I want to talk about these 4 cost cards first, which are kind of 3 cost cards in a Zabu Surge deck. So oftentimes we are going to be playing one of these cards on turn 3 and then another on turn 4 after we've done some setting up with Zabu and Surge. Iron Lad, fairly straightforward. I mean, not really. it's not really straightforward because it can be anything. It can even turn into an M'Baku or a Merlin, but it can also just turn into a Galactus and allow you to do a turn 3 Galactus, sometimes even a turn 2 Galactus. I guess a turn 1 Galactus is always possible with Project Pegasus, but I'm thinking like, did I say turn 2? No, turn 2's kind of crazy and still needs Project Pegasus, but turn 3 is fairly easy off of Zabu. You have to get a little bit lucky, of course, but is incredibly fun when you are able to do it. Anti-Venom is also a ramp card. It makes the top card of your deck a 0/0, which can, of course, hit Galactus. That seems like it's not going to be good, but I did just put out a YouTube short, you'll have to check that out, where I Galactused someone with an anti-venomed Galactus. And that is, of course, possible because Luke Cage can reset the power of whatever your anti-venom card is, so you can get it for free without the drawback. But there's some other really cool stuff that anti-venom is doing in this deck, because a 0 power card will also be Merlin's polymorph target. And the same is potentially true for Esme Cuckoo. There's some interesting plays that you can set up where you grab a card with Esme and then just either play that alone in a location or just play it in a location like alongside Iron Lad. That's not going to trip you up. And then you can still polymorph that card and you will get not a 4 power card from Esme or not a 1 power card from Anti-Venom, but polymorph will look at the actual cost of the card, and this goes for cards that you Surge or Zabu as well. Merlin's polymorph looks at the actual cost printed on the card and then gives you a card 1 energy higher. So if you anti-venom, weird example, if you anti-venom in Eliath and get a 0/0 Eliath and then polymorph it, it will then become a 7/7. Actually, it could become a 7/7 or a 7/12 because you could hit Arishem or you could hit Scar. And coming up, you'll also be able to hit Dormammu, so that'll give you even better odds. Dormammu is a 7/11, so that'll actually become a pretty reasonable plan that you could do, or even just polymorphing post Galactus as kind of an interesting setup. Those things will work. Right now, polymorphing Galactus is 50-50 to either get you a 7/7 or a 7/12 from Scar, and the odds will just improve in like a week or 2 or 3. So that's something to look forward to. But yeah, Esme Cuckoo and Anti-Venom can do some really interesting stuff in this deck with Polymorph when you miss. And Polymorph is not the only card in this deck that looks at cards' costs. And getting a little bit ahead of myself here, skipping over Symbiote Spider-Man, but Blink is a really cool combo with Anti-Venom that I think is really underexplored and seems like a really cool combo to be able to play in this deck. I also think there's potentially some room, maybe not necessarily in this deck, but just for Anti-Venom Blink in general. Something that, like play Anti-Venom Blink in, I don't know what deck. I don't know exactly what deck wants to do this, because the tricky part with Anti-Venom is it does want to get played alongside cards that have low power. So that way, if you hit like an Iron Man or something, then it's just a free Iron Man without any drawback. So those cards are, I think, where this strategy would be best is if you Anti-Venom like a White Tiger, and then you get a free 8 power White Tiger from that, or Spirit Tiger, and then you blink the White Tiger and then get a Odin, or you just get some random 6-cost card. Maybe it's like Leader or something like that, some cool on reveal card that you would also play alongside these. I think that there's just some cool untapped potential in an Anti-Venom Blink strategy that honestly you might not even need to play Luke Cage to facilitate. Possibly. I think that there's room for that out there. And definitely looks like something interesting that I would want to try. I'm also just now noticing that if you Iron Lad, there's like so many weird weird synergies in this deck, but if you Iron Lad or Esme and M'Baku, or if you throw Symbiote Spider-Man into an M'Baku and then shuffle it away for once in future to get that extra energy, then it will come out with a bunch of power at the end of the game. And that could just be a really cool way to surprise your opponent, get into weird locations, and altogether just do a lot of weird stuff. This deck can do very weird stuff, as evidenced by my YouTube short where I win with a 0 power Galactus. I almost feel like this deck is like a dog barking at a car. I just rewatched Dark Knight, but there is like we're trying to Galactus people. It's not necessarily the craziest Galactus deck once we actually get a hold of the car in that analogy, that all we have is Eliath on the final turn. There's definitely ways that this deck can lose as a Galactus deck, specifically because it is also a ramp Galactus deck. It is not just trying to play Galactus specifically on turn 5. There's curves that put out Galactus on turn 4 with this deck. Now, I think oftentimes it comes out on turn 5 because it comes out through Blink, but you could also like Surge a Blink or use the extra energy from Merlin to get some cards out faster. And when that happens, then you're kind of just left, okay, on turn 5, I guess I'm gonna just play my Blink and put 7 points onto the field. And then on the final turn, I guess I'm just gonna play Eliath and hopefully have priority, and then hopefully that's enough. Might not be against some of these decks that are out there. So that is part of the silliness with the deck. Symbiote Spider-Man certainly helps with that and gives you bigger Galactuses. It also lets your opponent a little bit in on exactly what's going on, because otherwise, if they haven't seen a content creator create a video on this deck, it's a very weird deck. And I could see just playing Zabu, Surge, Merlin, Anti-Venom against someone, and they've got no clue what's going on. Once you play Symbiote Spider-Man, I think the jig is kind of up, but I do think that there are opportunities to get even trickier with this strategy. This deck almost top 16'd the Golden Gauntlet 2 from Tractor, or Trickor. I think that this person's name is Tricker. That's what I'm going to name this, because this is also a Tricker deck with Zabu, Surge, and some similar 4-cost cards, this time adding in Galacta, which I think is an excellent addition to the original deck, and probably a little bit better than Esme. Esme can certainly do some interesting and some fun stuff as well, but I think Galacta just has so much more synergy with the Galactus game plan, and this deck is also potentially looking to somewhat pivot. There's a plan B in this deck, which is also making a big Nimrod and destroying it a bunch of times. And then there's also like a plan A plus B, where you can make a big Nimrod and then Galactus and get those big Nimrods into the Galactus location, because Galactus will destroy those Nimrods multiple times at the other location. So that can be a really cool combo when you get it all together. And when you don't, you can use Venom and Carnage and Arnim Zola to keep on destroying the Nimrod. Now, one other thing that I noticed about this strategy is Arnim Zola is a really cool anti-Venom card. And this deck is not doing all of the anti-Venom stuff. It's also not even doing the Merlin stuff. It's instead going for Penny Parker and Phastos, which are interesting because they can also be used to power up Nimrod and potentially play around some interesting things that your opponent might be throwing at you. But I think that there's a way to maybe evolve this deck even further and maybe make it even trickier, even trackier. So this is what I have come up with here. Magic trick, I am calling it, and I think it takes the best things from both of those decks that we've looked at and also includes another cool combo. I think it might even be a little too much. I think that it might have to be toned in a little bit, but there's some cool ideas here that we're starting to build with. This is a mostly untested deck, but I think it could do some really cool things potentially. It has a lot of the same setup as the first deck that we looked at. It doesn't have Luke Cage, so it can't do as crazy of things with anti-venom, but you can still use Merlin and Blink to get rid of the anti-venom card if you miss. But there's still a number of just genuine hits in this deck, like Galacta, Gwenpool, and Arnim Zola, that you are mostly playing for their abilities and not their power. You're playing them for the power that they generate through their abilities. In addition to pumping up Galactus and having more ways to pump Galactus up with both Gwenpool and Galacta, we already know that Zabu, Surge, Galacta, Gwenpool is a tried and true deck core. Typically, we see this played alongside Shang-Chi. I suppose you could try to fit a Shang-Chi into this deck, especially if you want to have a post-Galactus game plan, but this is not really trying to be a post-Galactus game plan deck. This is trying to be a turn 6 Galactus deck, and there is definitely still some interesting ambiguity when you have both Galactus and other interesting cards that you can pump up and then send to other locations with Arnim Zola. So this deck has Black Panther and Nimrod. That might be overkill. There's a chance that that is too many different cards that we are trying to pump up, but I want to try them both out. I think that Arnim Zola Black Panther is the more classic combo here. Oftentimes you see Nimrod paired with some of those destroy cards, Carnage, Venom, Deathlock, and even Destroyer, and I don't have room to put them in this deck list, but I wanted to still play Nimrod because if you are able to pump it up with Gwenpool or / and Galacta, if you are going like Zabu into Galacta, into Gwenpool, into Nimrod, you could potentially have like a, let's say, 11 power Nimrod that then on the final turn you Arnim Zola to put 22 power into those other two locations. That's not quite Black Panther levels, but I mean, that's normal Black Panther levels. If you just go Black Panther, Arnim Zola, that's 20 power in both of the other locations, and it gets bigger, of course, if you throw in a Symbiote Spider-Man. Oh, sure, yeah. So let's make this curve a little bit better. It's Zabu into Surge. We'll say that the Surge misses just for math simplicity, but then you Galacta into Symbiote Spider-Man for 10 power, and then you Nimrod onto the Symbiote Spider-Man. That is going to give you a 19 power Nimrod for 38 power at both of the other two locations. So there are some really cool backup plans that this deck can do. Blink plus all of this other stuff seems like a lot of chaos, but I think that that could lead to some really interesting and tricky maneuvers that you could pull off. And yeah, let's maybe take it for a spin for one game. What do you say? Let's play one game with this deck and see if anything fun can happen here. We've got Zabu and Surge, but I'm not going to snap because I don't want my opponent to retreat. So we'll just see what we can make happen with a pretty solid curve here. Atlantis, not bad. Merlin, also not bad. Maybe we play Merlin and that way we can curve out into Surge plus Spell next turn. Give us that as an option too. Echo, not doing anything against us. And Lechugia, but we have Omniversal Presence to shuffle this Surge back in. I think for now we're going to play Symbiote Spider-Man. I mean, I'm also kind of into clearing my hand for a Gwenpool next turn and keeping the Symbiote Spider-Man, but I think we'll just curve out Symbiote into Gwenpool, into Nimrod. If we hit Galacta, then maybe we'll have to retool, but let's see where this gets us for now. Oh, Maximus, we're going to be able to Galactus then, for sure. For sure, right? Or we might hit Arnim Zola here. Oh no, we hit the Merlin. We hit the Merlin spell. So do we get some ramp online? This is good. This could set up for a number of different options. Next turn we could Surge plus Nimrod or Polymorph. Polymorph the anti-venom card could be interesting. Sure. A lot of crazy lines in this deck for sure. Oh, that was the wrong spell. I thought that was once in future. My bad, y'all. All right, Supergiant's going to mess up an Arnim Zola flow. And it also messes up a Blink unless we play the Blink on the final turn. I'm almost thinking we could, right? On the final turn, we could Blink this, but then we never get the Galactus out. Yeah, the Supergiant definitely making things a little bit tricky. Let me just lead with this, because I don't know what's happening here yet. And now here's the Galactus. Now, is this just as simple as playing Galactus and activating it? I mean, probably. I think there's some cooler things that we could have done in some other universes, but those aren't happening here. Probably just win with Galactus. We've got Galactus with priority. We've got an 18-point Atlantis, or I'm sorry, a 19-point Atlantis, and my opponent has a bunch of unrevealed cards that will destroy it. Okay, there we go. I think that because this deck is so weird, it is kind of tough to just show off a random game to show off the deck, because it's all about crazy different play lines that might show up from time to time, but let's give it another shot. Turn 1 Zabu, not too bad. I can't draw Blink, so that's not great. But I've got Symbiote, Spider-Man, Galactus, Arnim Zola, so there's some big plays that I can still have access to here. Utopia, I could draw any 4 and play it. Galacta would have been insane there. Galacta will still be good next turn, though. New York has some interesting applications, too. Maybe we Gwenpool and we let Gwenpool decide what the strategy is going to be for this game. If she pumps up Galactus, we go for that. If she pumps up Nimrod, we go for that. Okay, Nimrod, it looks like that's the plan now. But we also have Symbiote, Spider-Man into Black Panther into Arnim Zola. A lot of options. A lot of options here. That's kind of the point. Is your opponent doesn't really know which of these things you're going to go for. We could still go for a Galactus, especially with New York. Oh, we can kind of do like an actual good magic trick here. So what's the most points? Black Panther would be for 10, and then 19 times 2 is 36. But if we do this, the Galactus play plus Nimrod could be really good. I said I was going to let Gwenpool decide, and Gwenpool put some stats on Nimrod, so let's at least start with this. And now I'm not activating here because I can move over the Symbiote Spider-Man into New York, activate Galactus, and then I've got a 15-point Galactus plus an 8-point Nimrod for 23 points on the final turn. I don't think I ever have priority here. Okay, I certainly do not. And then could also just Arnim Zola. Ooh, they polymorph a Gwen. That's fun. If they move over Galacta, they have 14 points here. So if I move over Symbiote Spider-Man and they just move over Galacta, we beat them. Why would they move over Galacta? Because they need to win. I I don't even know what their plan is. I don't know what my plan is. I could also just put 34 points here and here. That seems like it's probably better, right? I like that we have a lot of options, despite New York making this a really strange game. But I think this could just be the best option among them. This gets stopped by, like, Eliath. I'm glad that the Spider-Man 2099 is already in New York, so I don't have to consider that. Yeah, it's really just like... They don't even have Acid Arrow to really funk me up here. Let's go with this. We already did a Galactus game. Let's go for an Arnim Zola game. Let's see what they got. That's Mockingbird. This could be anything. It's Sasquatch. But we're going to put 34 power up to 44 over in Lake Hellas and New York. We also would have won it with the Galactus game plan, so it doesn't matter. Had all Ds. And there you go. That's Magic Trick. I'm NoLucksGiven. Thank you guys very much for watching. Peace.